Hey yo, and welcome to the dojo. My name is Code, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new deck that is tearing up the Japan meta. We're going to be talking about Dragapult EX. Let's just take a look at this. So starting from the 27th is when this deck was available to start being played. You'll start notice Dragapult, 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 Dragapult. I think you're going to get the idea here. There is a lot of my buddy Dragapult showing up, and there's a few different variations that people are currently building this deck. So if you see all my little tabs up here, these are all just the first place winning versions of this deck in each of these different city leagues. And let's take a look. So some people are building this deck kind of Charizard-esque. You can see Pidgeot, Rotom, Lumineon. Very Charizard-esque, right? We do have the Iron Bundle here for Switch, but I guess maybe before we dive too far into these decks, we should talk about what does Dragapult even do. Dragapult EX, of course, is a Stage 2 Pokemon evolving from Dreepy and Dracloak, and he has a attack for colorless energy that does 70 damage, but he also has this really interesting attack for Fire Psychic. It does 200 damage and puts 6 damage counter on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. Spread is back, my friends. Spread is back. So this alone, like, decent, but what makes the deck even more insane is the Cloak that comes along with it. Just like how Gardevoir dominated when it first came out, because you had the Curlia engine built into the Stage 1, Dracloak here has this ability translated here as Surveillance. You may use this ability once during your turn. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand. Put the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck. This is a very similar ability. I believe a Pidgeot used to have it. It was called Airmail back in the day. So you have a draw engine with Dracloak, and you have this really strong Stage 2 Pokemon that is a Dragon type, so no weakness. So you can kind of see why this deck is being a menace in this Japan meta. So let's take a closer look at all these first place decks, and let's see if we can see any patterns emerging, and I'll give you my takes on them as we go through. So yes, this first deck we have here is a Pidgeot support system with a Rotom and a Lumineon, of course. Because we play some Vs, we can see we're playing a Forest Sealstone as well. Iron Bundles seems like it could be pretty good in this deck because our Dragapult EX is hitting the active for 200 and placing 6 damage counters onto the bench. You can imagine you don't want to like over commit your damage to the active. 400 is going to knock out basically everything except a cloaked Charizard EX. So you want a way to switch your opponent's Pokemon in and out of the active. So you can see we're also playing 2 boss in this build. Let's see, a card that we probably haven't seen in many decks since it came out is the Mela. You can use this card only if your Pokemon were knocked out during your last turn. Attach a basic fire energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon. If you do this, draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. So a little bit reminiscent of a Raihan with a fill instead of like get another card out of your deck. So that's interesting. We need ways to get energy onto our Dragapults. And you can see this build of the deck is playing a 4/4 split of energy and a Neo upper energy as the ace spec, which is interesting. As we go through all these decks, you're going to see that many different ace specs are being played with this deck currently. There's definitely no perfect 60 yet. Other notable things about this deck, I would say, is, of course, we're going to play the Earthen Vessels because we need to get those energies into our hands so that we can do our manual attaches. We have a 1 of Mellet for that energy acceleration on the off chance a Pokemon gets knocked out. The other interesting cards in this deck are probably the Enhanced Hammer, which is going to be a card that is reprinted in our upcoming Twilight Masquerade set as well. Discard a special energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So this can come into play in a couple different ways. One is, since you're placing damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, you're going to want to make sure they don't have a mist energy attached to their Pokemon. And also, as we go through these different decks, we'll notice that a couple of the different energy ace specs are being played in these decks. So it's also a decent tech for the Mirror to play the Enhanced Hammer. You might want to smash away their Neo upper energy, or the other new ace spec that we'll see, I'm sure, later on, the Legacy energy is also a 1 rainbow energy that if the Pokemon the card's attached to is knocked out, you take 1 fewer prizes. We're playing a choice belt in here as well. The choice belt, I guess, probably helps you hit basic Vs for knockout. So you could take out Arceus, Lugia Vs right away. And this build is playing the 4 candy. We're going to see a lot of different candy counts throughout this deck. We're playing a 1 TM Devo in this build. Of course, great into any of the evolving decks, including Charizard, especially if we're placing damage counters. You can imagine that playing a TM Devolution is pretty decent as well. We play the Collapse to get rid of the Lumineon and Rotom, as well as any damaged Dragapults. And we also have a Temple of Sinnoh in here for good measure for, again, we really want to shut off special energies. Another deck that is doing quite well in the new Japan meta because of the Legacy Energy A-Spec that was printed is Lugia. Lugia has an option to basically play a Rainbow Energy again that actually works with other special energy. So Temple of Sinnoh is another card that we're going to see quite a bit of. Let's just keep going through. We have a lot of decks to see today, and we'll see if we see any themes. This deck is no Pidgeot, but we do have another new card, which is the Tatsugiri, and he of course has the ability attracting customers. You may use this ability once during your turn. If this Pokemon is in the active spot, look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put a supporter you find there into your hand, shuffle your cards afterwards. So very good for digging for supporters, kind of reminiscent of Mysterious Tail Mew that just rotated away, but instead of finding item cards, you're digging for supporters. And the Tatsugiri has a 1 retreat cost, which is notable. So you'll notice that a lot of these builds that are going to be playing the Tatsugiri in their deck are also going to be playing a way to pivot it. So our 1 of Rescue board is a popular option. Just like a lot of the Zard decks of today, the supporter draw engine for a lot of these Dragapult decks are Arvens. So you're going to have a way to grab, even though you only play a 1 of Rescue board, as long as you don't have it prized, you have a way to grab it with your Arvens. What other cards are unique to this? We can see we have a lower candy count here. We're not playing the Pidgeot. And the other notable thing I'll call out here is this build is playing a 1 TM Evolution. So good for getting Dracloaks down as fast as possible. We'll see some other ways to do that in some other decks here shortly. And the other interesting card in this deck that I think is probably the Radiant Pokemon of choice, of course, is the Radiant Alakazam, who has the Painful Spoons ability. Once during your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another Pokemon. You can think that if we're playing with Dragapult, we're going to be placing 6 damage counters. Now, a lot of optimal starters right now have 60 HP, so Dragapult is going to be able to knock them out just fine. But you can imagine if Dragapult is being super popular, that a lot of the 70 HP variants of those Pokemon are going to start coming back into play, so they're not just instantly KO'd. One way to get around that and to play around with some damage is, of course, play the Radiant Alakazam and allow you to move some of those extra damage counters that you're going to be overhitting the active with that 200 damage and spread them to the bench on the following turn. So that will be another popular card we see. Let's keep going. Here's the first time we're going to see somebody is pairing Dragapult in the Lost Box engine. You can see we're playing 4 Comfy, Cram, Sableye. You can see like this could kind of work. Only playing 3 Gates, 4 Colress though. Going down to 2 Candy because we're kind of a Lost Box deck. And you can see here we're playing the Unfair Stamp as our ace spec, so another different ace spec in this deck. And we're also playing the Radiant Charizard because we're playing Fire Energy. Radiant Charizard is a decent fit into this deck as well. I would argue probably not as good as the Radiant Alakazam. Other things to mention about this deck that are a little different, of course, we've got the Lost Box cards, but we also have this new supporter Kieran, which is kind of interesting. I think we could be seeing this as a one of in a number of lists for a number of reasons. It allows you to choose one. You can either switch your active Pokemon to your bench, so it can act as a switch, or The Pokemon's attack does 30 more damage to your opponent's active EX or V this turn. So you can have a damage boost built into this deck as well, which is kind of interesting. I think this card could be decently popular, especially if like control is popping up a lot. You can imagine you want a switch that your opponent cannot burn away with Eries. So Kieran is that, as well as if plays that double purpose right, where we are able to actually boost our damage for some critical knockouts on maybe a basic V Pokemon like Arceus or Lugia. So Kieran, I think we'll see an okay amount of play as well. Let's see what else we got going on here. We have some Roxannes because we're playing a Lost Box here. This might be the first list we've seen a Vacuum in. We can also see we're playing an Artisan in this list because, again, Lost Box, you need to get out your Pokemon to tear through the deck. All right, this is the first time we're seeing our friend Dragapult paired up with the Natu-Zatu engine. Of course, Zatu has that clairvoyant sensibility. Once during your turn, you may attach a psychic energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon. If you attached it to a Pokemon in this way, draw 2 cards. So you get some energy acceleration and some drawing. So if you can manually attach a fire energy, Candy Dreepy into your Dragapult, and then Clairvoyant Sense a Psychic from your hand that you fetched with your Earthen Vessel, you can imagine you'll be able to pull off turn 2 attacks with this deck, potentially, if all the pieces align. What else is notable about this deck? We also see a Jirachi for the first time in this one. And here we're just playing kind of more of the traditional supporters. So nothing too fancy there. But this is the first time we are seeing the Scoop Up Cyclone, which is a old A-Spec, which is being brought back to life in this set. So this A-Spec allows you to put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it to your hand. So it's kind of like a better Professor's Turo, right? Professor Turo, you have to discard some of the cards that you actually pick up. But here, it allows us to pick up a card and get everything back into hand. So you can imagine if you have a bunch of Dracloaks set up on your bench, you know, you let your Dragapult, he's a beefy boy with 320 HP and no weakness. So you let him soak a hit, and then you scoop up Cyclone, your Dragapult, you attach the energy that you scooped up, and you evolve one of your Dracloaks in the active, and now you have a new fresh attacker, with 0 damage on it. So you can see how that could be good in a deck. The next list, we're going down to a 1-1 lineup of the Natu-Zatu, but we brought in a Rotom as well here to kind of balance out maybe the early turn games. This is the first time we're seeing the Lance. I'm not sure if you've looked up on TCG Player recently, but let's just go there. Let's look at this full art. What was the price? It was trending at $257. And now 2 or 3 days later, it's a $20 card, 10x in a couple days because Dragapult. But let's read the card. Lance, search your deck for up to 3 dragon Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So you can, this is played as a 2 of here. I've seen other lists, and I think we'll look at some today where you're just playing this as a 1 of. It's a really good early game supporter for setting up. You can think if you're going first, you get a bunch of Dreepies out with your Buddy Poffin. On your turn 2, you Lance and get a bunch of Cloaks down, and maybe then you candy one of your Dreepies into a Dragapult and start attacking. This list also plays the Defiance Band for a little extra damage. Although, I don't know, you probably are like losing a Pokemon before your opponent, but after that, you're pretty much going to be in control with this deck. So I'm not sure about the Defiance Band. All right, what else do we got going on here? This is a first time we're seeing both Pidgey and the Zatu engine paired up in a deck together. I think of all the types of engines we've seen here, this is probably where I'm personally going to start for supporting Pokemon. I love the idea of going and searching out any card you need, as well as having some energy acceleration built into the deck as well. I worry a little bit with this build with some of the supporters. I would like to see I think, if you're going to play the Pidgeot, that really enables you to play a lot of 1-ofs, and I think we could use some more 1-ofs in this deck. We are playing the TM Evo and Devolution in this deck. I do like that play. I think that is a good choice for Dragapult. Ahaha. If you thought we had seen all of the different variations, think again. What's the best current deck and format? Charizard? Well, let's just throw Dragapult and Charizard together. You can imagine that Charizard is not only a great late game attacker for taking devastating KOs at the end of the game, but it's also a good fire energy acceleration to your Dragapult as well. This list is also playing the Lance to get, again, those Dragon Pokemon out as fast as possible. 3 candies. Unfair Stamp. I don't think we read Unfair Stamp. I did talk about it earlier, but you can play this card only if your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Both players shuffle their hands into your deck. Then you draw 5 and your opponent draws 2. An early game Unfair Stamp could be devastating to your opponent. Again, these are all first place winning decks from Japan. We're not looking at any of the other ones except the ones that took first. Again, this is kind of more like a traditional Charizard line of Pokemon that you might find. Supporters, we do have the Kirin again, and we do have the Mela. No Lance, 3 Arvins. Neo Upper Energy is the choice here. Here we have another Lost Box, very similar to the other one we looked at, but this time we are playing a Prime Catcher in the deck. As we can see, like, all of these lists are playing very different A-specs right now. Everyone is trying to find the optimal one. I think where I'm personally going to start is I'm probably going to start with the Scoop Up Cyclone, but I could see Prime Catcher being very good as well. I would like to see, I think, one more boss, but I guess because you're playing Prime Catcher is why they went down to 1 boss in this deck. But this does seem cool. I definitely will try this Lost Zone Dragapult variation as well when I get my hands on the cards. Here, we've kind of looked at a version of this deck already. The only card that's in this one list that we haven't seen so far is EXP Share. You really don't want to miss a beat with your manual attachments, so EXP sharing a Dracloak. Does that work on Dracloak? When you poke, you may move 1 basic. Yeah, it works on all Pokemon. I didn't remember if it was just basics or not. So yeah, EXP Share. Could be interesting, I guess. Also plays a Turo to pick up since we're playing the Unfair Stamp and not the Scoop Up Cyclone. Let's see, this list, kind of another standard swap out Dragapult for Charizard type list. I really don't like seeing only 2 Dracloak. I think that ability on Dracloak is so good. I understand that you're playing 4 candy, so maybe you're not using Dracloak as much, but I don't know. I think the minimum amount of Dracloak I would like to see in a deck is probably 3. And it's just such a good card where I think you should probably just play it as a 4 of. But obviously you have to make cuts elsewhere if you do so. You can see all of these builds currently are super aggressive. They're not doing like one really popular tech in Charizard right now that we're not seeing in any of these lists is like an Eerie, something Disruption. These lists are all very aggro and just want to take control of the game. This one was playing the Neo Upper Energy. Here's another smash a Charizard and a Dragapult together, playing the Scoop Up Cyclone, playing the Rescue Board. I think if you're playing the Tatsugiri, you're always going to play a 1 of Rescue Board as well. 2 Rod for energy recovery, and a Heavy Ball. Looks like another Lost Box. So this list actually has a couple of very interesting cards in it. For one, it has the Hawlucha. Not sure if y'all remember the Hawlucha with its flying entry when this Pokemon. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may choose 2 Pokemon on your opponent's bench and put 1 damage counter on each of them. Again, right now there are a decent number of 60 HP basics in format, but there are some 70 HP ones, and I assume with Dragapult becoming more popular, we're going to see the rise of more 70 HP basics. So having a way to ping a couple things on your opponent's bench so that you can place perfect damage to knock out with your Dragapult spread could be devastating. The other very interesting card we see in this list is the Fresh Water set, a card that we probably never expected to see here. And I think this is probably here. It's heal 20 from each of your Pokemon. This is a tech for the mirror match or any spreading of damage. If you can heal up on your side damage counters, if your opponent's trying to play like greedy and keep you from benching more and like spreading damage around more equally, you can negate that with the freshwater set. So kind of interesting. And they also play a jet in here, which I guess you do because of Lost Box things. I don't know. Here we see a Pidgey build with the Radiant Alakazam. I like the Alakazam. Like I said, I think that's my Radiant of choice for when I'm going to first try out these lists. Other than that, I think we've seen all these other cards. Unfair Stamp. This one has some cards we haven't seen. This Pokemon set right here is, I think, where I want to start with this deck. I like having the option of the Zatu here. I think this acts very similar to the 1/1 Bibarel line we see in Charizard today. So you pair that with the Pidgeot, so you can draw any card you want out of your deck. I like that this build is playing some more one-of tech supporters. Like if you're playing, again, Pidgeot, you should be playing some one-ofs, so you're prepared for different types of situations. And this is the first time we're seeing the Lana's Assistance in a deck. It's put up to 3 of any combination of Pokemon except for those with the rule box and basic cards from your discard pile into your hand. Of course, very similar to what Clara was doing previously. So kind of a cool card. If you're playing if you're playing like the Zatu, making sure you have energy in your hand so you can draw cards and get an extra attachment is key. This one is a Zatu engine with a Rotom Assist. Very basic supporter line, playing the Scoop Up Cyclone. We can see most lists are floating around 7 or 8 energy as we go through all these two. And Temple of Sinnoh seems to be the for sure stadium of choice, with some others playing a Collapsed as well. I think it is important with this deck to at least play a Collapsed or a Turo. I mean, if you have the Scoop Up Cyclone, you don't necessarily need the Turo, but we've just seen recently how important it is in Zard to be able to fix your board, and I think you're going to want to be able to fix your board a lot with Dragapult as well, so you can manipulate damage in your favor. Here's an interesting list. We haven't seen one quite like this yet. I don't love the 4-3-4 line. I'd like to see that as a 4-4-3 probably, but they're playing 2 Squawks in this deck. They just want to tear through their deck, get as perfectly set up as possible on that first turn, probably going second, this version of the deck. If you're playing the Squawk ability, you really want to hit the correct supporter. You probably want to hit the Lance, or you want to get the Rotom down and get that V-Star power to go grab Lance or an Arven. So that's kind of interesting. I think this, like these Squawkabilly type decks, I don't think are super awesome. Not when you pair it with evolution Pokemon. I think they work a lot better when you're pairing it with like basic Pokemon attackers, but yeah, you never know, I guess. It got first place. Here's another. This build is very interesting. This one is trying to do quite a bit. Yeah, let's break this down. So we're playing a 4-4-3 line of the Dragapult. We're playing a 2-2 line of Armarouge, and for those of you that are unfamiliar, Armarouge has the ability Fire Off. As often as you like to in your turn, you may move 1 fire energy from one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So the idea with this deck in particular is you're using Armarouge to power up your Dragapults. Basically, you're in a Magma Basin, 2 Armarouge, and Fire Off from your Armarouge to your Dragapult that fire energy. Kind of interesting. We also get to see Klefki in here for the first time, as long as this Pokemon's in the active spot. Basic Pokemon in play have no abilities except for Mischievous Lock. So a bit of stall while you can set up, and this is the first list that we see that plays the Monkey Dory, whose attack you're never really using, but you could. Your opponent's Pokemon is now confused for Psychic Colorless, but you're playing this for its ability. The Arena Brain. You may use this ability once you're in your turn if this Pokemon has a dark energy attached to it. Move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So super powerful ability. Anytime you can manipulate damage from your side of the board and send it to your opponent's side of the board, awesome. In previous formats, we've seen Cresselia, you know, and Gardevoir be very popular for that reason. It was a way to kind of negate Lost Box, stabilize spreads. Yeah, anytime you can heal your Pokemon and do damage to your opponents, very cool. And we can see that we're not playing any Dark Energy, but we are playing 3 Luminous Energy in this deck. I kind of do like the idea of playing like maybe 2 Luminous Energy, even in a different version of Dragapult, just so you can kind of fix your energy attachments should you get stuck with some weird energies in hand. I think that's a cool idea. This build's only playing 1 candy. You're really trying to use your draw engine of the Dracloaks here. What else is interesting in this deck? This one's spicy. We're playing the Secret Box. Very, very cool card. You must discard 3 cards from your hand to play this card. And if you do, search your deck for one of each item, Pokemon Tool, Supporter, and Stadium card. So you got to kind of think of this card as, I'm going to play the Secret Box, get rid of 3 cards. So you're really putting 4 cards in your discard pile, and you're trading those for an item, a tool, a supporter, and a stadium. So this, you can imagine this card is going to be played in any decks that have those big wombo combos that they're trying to pull off. Yeah, that could be cool. That could be cool. This is a spicy list. I like it. I like it. I don't know if this is good, but it's cool. Zatu engine, got some big V support Pokemon, 4 Seal Stone, 2 Sinnohs and 1 Collapse. That's a lot of stadiums. Very basic supporters. Evo Devo. I really like playing both the Evo and the Devo in this deck. I like the idea of that. A very weird playing the Pokemon Go Natu. Is this for a reason? I bet they just didn't have the other Natu, and they're playing a 1-2 line. Not ideal, but hey, they won. Very similar to other lists. Not really playing a support engine, really relying on the Dracloaks in this one, playing the Neo Upper Energy to make sure that you can get that single energy attachment and it start attacking. Neo Upper is definitely, I mean, as you can see, like there's a lot of different A-specs in these Dragapult decks, so there's a lot of different ways you could take this. Here is the first time we see a Cleffa with its Grasping Draw attack. Draw until you have 7 cards in your hand for no energy, so that's kind of cool. Kind of got a spicy supporter line. I like to see it with the Pidgeot. 2 Lance. I don't know if you need 2. Would like to see probably, I guess 3 is fine in these Pidgeot versions of this deck, because you're playing 4 candy. You're really going to candy up a lot of your Dreepies and 2 Dragapults. Cool list. I like it overall. I like it. And they are playing the EXP share in this one as well. It'll be interesting to see how these lists evolve over time. Like, you know, Charizard, when it started off, people were probably playing up to like 7 or 8 energy, and it's really whittled down as the builds have become more refined. I'm curious to see what like the optimal amount of energy is going to end up being for our friend Dragapult. I think you do need to play a little more. You don't have Charizard's amazing ability unless you pair Charizard with Dragapult, as we've seen some of these decks do, to get that energy acceleration. But you can see all of these lists are playing Earthen Vessels to try to get some energy in hand. Another one, very similar to others, very conservative supporters in this list. I don't know about 3 candy. I think if you're playing the Pidgeot, and maybe 3 is okay if you play 4 Dracloak. I guess that's the sacrifice, right? Do you play 4 Dracloak or do you play 4 candy? I think that's kind of the trade-off we've been seeing and noticing in some of these lists. This list plays in a rescue board, and I don't know if I agree with it. I guess none of your basics have free retreat and your energy are all super important, but if you're playing the rescue board, I feel like you should be playing the Tatsugiri. And like, how many Pokemon is this? Because this is similar to what I would probably be running. So this is 4, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's a lot of poke. That's a lot of poke. I think I would cut a Rotom here and put in a Tatsugiri. That would just be me. Especially if you're playing the heavy ball. We don't need to be playing 2 Rotom. But here's another list with 2 Rotom. Here we see the Iron Bundle come back in this list. I really do like the idea of a Bundy. Because again, we don't want to be over committing damage to the active. 400 is probably overkill for most pokes. Playing the Unfair Stamp, playing the Choice Belt to make sure we hit the right damage. And 2 Sinnoh, 1 Collapsed. Decent number of these builds have the 2 Sinnoh. Really worried about those missed energies. And like Legacy Energy is annoying. And just like Lugia. Lugia is going to be really good in this format as well. So I think we do have to be a little bit worried about Lugia. Here's another one that's doing a 1-2 line of these Natu-Zatu. Don't love that. Playing a Silene in here, trying to get some extra use out of the Scoop Up Cyclone, I imagine. I think Silene is just a really good card right now, too. I'm not sure if I would try to fit it in this list, but here we're seeing another Lost Box variant of the deck. Notably absent from this build, though, is a Sableye. I think if you're going to be playing Lost Box, you ought to be playing Sableye since you're playing Psychic Energy anyways. I would cut a Counter Catcher, or Counter Catcher is the first card I see that I would cut from this list. Or maybe a Dracloak. Maybe you don't need 4, and then get a Sableye in this deck. I also don't think you need 2 Evos. I think 1 is probably good enough. 3 Jets. Jets don't do anything for your Dragapult is the sad thing. I mean, you do have the Jet Headbutt or whatever the first attack is. Yeah, Jet Headbutt for 70 for colorless, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't love this Lost Box version as much as I did some of the others. Here again, let's just mash in a Charizard as well. God, if this deck actually works with a Charizard in it, that's super scary. I can't imagine this being super duper consistent though. I think you're gonna have consistency problems if the cards don't line up correctly for you. But I mean, you're playing Lumineon and Rotomanaphore Sealstone, so maybe it works. I don't know. Seems like a lot though. But here's another one. We see Radiant Serena in a deck for the first time. Once during your turn, you may heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. Again, just like we've seen a couple of fresh water sets in some of the decks. Being able to heal damage from your side of the board could be important, especially in the mirror matches. Or else I think we've kind of seen all the other cards. Looks like we only do have 2 more decks to look at here. Here we got a Zatu engine with Alakazam for moving some stuff around. First time we're seeing the Handy Fan tool. If the active Pokemon this card is attached to is damaged by your opponent's attack, move an energy from the attacking Pokemon to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it's kind of trying to deny your opponent from being able to attack again. Could be an interesting card for the mirror match, as well as probably Charizard. Decks that might struggle, especially Charizard, you know, like they really do have to play with, they are playing with thin counts of energy today. So if you're able to like get an energy to move someplace where they don't want, could be interesting. And the last deck is another Dragapult-Charizard. This one's kind of similar to the others. Wow. Dragapult EX does sure look like a menace in this upcoming meta. I can't wait to try it out myself though. Not gonna lie, Dragapult is one of my favorite Pokemon, so I'm quite excited. But if you liked what you saw here today, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Dragapult. Give a like, and if you really liked what's going on here, subscribe for more pack opening and Pokemon TCG content. Until next time, peace.